Welcome back to the Fly Culture podcast with me, Pete Tigers. I'm just back from a road trip and spent a fantastic weekend at the Tweed Salmon Festival. I really do hope this is going to be the first of many. What Ian and Colin have done has been fabulous for our community as a whole, and I really hope that this continues to go from strength to strength. On that front, you asked for it, so it's happening. A Fly Culture gathering night right here in Devon. It's going to be at the Fox and Hounds on the banks of my beloved River Tour. There'll be some great guests, free beer, burgers too, and it's going to be on Thursday, June the 19th from 6 p.m. till 9 p.m. I hope I'll see you there. Okay, on to my guest. He's been around fishing for a long time now, and although you might associate him with stillwater fishing, he's equally at home on the river. We'll be covering a lot of ground, including his new job that we're about to hear about, and I'm really pleased to be joined today by Tom Bird. Tom, welcome along to the podcast. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
It's nice to catch up with you, and we were talking off mic, and I know at the BFFI I was desperately trying to catch your eye because I wanted to speak to you, but you looked like you were pretty rushed off your feet on the stand you were working on.
Yeah, it was very busy. I was working on the Uphaven stand, so very busy. A lot of people coming in, looking at the fly tie materials and the resins. So it was good. I always enjoyed that show.
Yeah, it seemed a really busy one.
Yeah, I mean, I used to do it with Ivor for a number of years, and it just keeps getting busier and busier. Steve does a fantastic job organising it, and I think it's one of those, everyone who's serious into fly fishing or just, it's well publicised, and I think it's one of those, everyone turns up, it's in the calendar well in advance, and everyone wants to go, so it makes it a really good show.
Yeah, absolutely. And I used to enjoy the evening part of it when everyone had gone home and you get to sit down with friends, catch up with some friends and have a bit of a chat and talk fishing.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's sort of livelihood, they're all working in it, it's a massive passion. You'd thought full day of talking fly fishing, that'd be enough, but no, we'll go to the pub and carry on talking about it.
Very, very civilised. So what have you been up to fishing-wise?
I've been out on the river already this season, up back home on the Irwelch near Manchester, quite an urban river, but very good. I fished Farmore a couple of times, videoing with Ben at Uphaven. Didn't get out for the grayling, unfortunately. Every time the river was right this year, I was too busy. But yeah, I've already got some bookings in the calendar for sort of matches this coming year, so hopefully get out on the reses and also the rivers a bit.
Because some people might think of you as primarily a stillwater angler, but you're equally at home on the river as well, aren't you?
Yeah, I actually I grew up fishing the rivers, started when I was a kid, and rivers was the first thing that sort of got me into fly fishing, really. So, I've done lots and lots of river fishing. Really love the rivers, to be honest. I think if I had to pick one, I would probably choose to sort of rivers would be my choice. If someone had a gun to your head and said you could only fish one, it'd probably be rivers, just because the versatility of them and it's good.
Do you think people would be surprised to hear you say that?
Probably, yeah, probably. And I think it's probably a little bit as well. It's away from work. I spent 9 years at Draycote, associated heavily with stillwaters. I worked at stocks before then. So I think so. But I think if anyone actually fishes a river and gets into it and goes and fishes not just one river and has a bit of a dabble, but goes and fishes a number of them and gets into it, the tactics and the tackle and actually trying to progress your river fishing, I think they'll find that there's probably more to it. I think there's more to river fishing and there's more to keep you interested. You could go out and be a solely dry fine man fishing in the big hatches and really matching the hatch, like you can on reses, but that is the only thing you do. Whereas, there could be somebody that just fishes big streamers. But if you do all of that, I think there's just a little bit more to keep you interested. If that makes sense.
It does, totally. And I kind of get where you're coming from, that you're working, and this is the really interesting thing about it, isn't it? That if you're deeply ingrained in fishing, sometimes going away from what you're really involved with is a nice break from it as well, isn't it? Keeps you fresh.
Yeah, you just getting, when I used to go in and fish at Draycote or but people knew who you were. They'd be speaking to you in the lodge, which is fine. I completely understand. I always tell people the best advice you can ever have is speaking to someone in the lodge who knows what they're doing, and has been there more than you recently. So ask them. So I had no issues when I went to fish, but it did sort of detract a little bit away, especially when you got out in the boat and you were fishing away and you could hear people going, "Oh, is that Tom?" And it like made is that Tom? I thought, "Oh, I think it is." And then they'd like shout over, and then all of a sudden you're kind of doing a little bit of work while you're out there fishing, and it does detract a little bit away from it.
And also, because of those sorts of things that you described, does that mean as well? I'm sure it's not the right word, but the pressure of being the expert. When you go away from the river, you don't have to worry about answering questions, bumping into people. You can just go out the river, clear the mind, and reset.
Yeah, I think there is. Obviously, when I go, I want to catch and have a good day. But there is that. Certainly, we always used to say it. Lee, who used to work at Draycote, he was a competition angler, and we never either had a rule that you couldn't fish competitions on your waters, just because he didn't think it was right that the guides and the people that worked there were winning prizes. And I always said, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. If you go out there and win it, people say, well, he should be winning it. He knows where all the fish are. Everyone tells him what to do. And then if you do rubbish, people are like, well, why is he telling us how to fish this water? He obviously doesn't know how to fish it at all. So it was always one of those, it was sort of, poison chalice, really, going out there and enjoying it. But at the end of the day, I enjoy my fishing, and I take it when I go out on a day. I do take the fishing side of it quite seriously. So I did tend to catch a few, and even if you're not catching a load, you'd still glean information that you could give to people in the lodge, and that was one of the important things. I think that if you're gonna work, in fisheries like that and be really keen and well into your fishing, you've got to a certain extent, I think you've got to fish the waters that you're talking about, because there's nothing better than being out on the water yourself. Because even if we could only at Drake, we could only give the advice that the anglers would tell me. So if 99% of the anglers came in and they're all fishing down tough shallows, but on my pleasure day I went out to Rainbow Corner and caught 2 or 3 fish, I knew that I could say to people, look, Toff's the place that's been fishing because of this, but if you go up here, I know there is fish. And you can confidently say that. And, it's like when you're advising people on flies in the shop or tactics. If you're using that tactic, you're going to speak about it more confidently.
That's the definition of a guide, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
And it's amazing what you were saying, because I was having a meeting earlier, and Tom Butt, I know you'll be listening to this, I said exactly what you said to him 3 hours ago. The same thing, that if you're guiding, when you go pleasure fishing, you feel a pressure because, for the reasons exactly that you said, if you're supposed to catch all the fish because you're the fishing guide, and if you don't catch all the fish, you're rubbish. And there's sort of not an in-between, is there really?
No, there's not. I mean, and people, and even if you weren't having, if you have a good day and you come off the pontoon, you'd still get it, even to, not even in comps. People are like, oh, well, you should be catching that many. Or like, they can't wait to tell you that they've done better than you if you've only had 2 or 3.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been there. It's exactly the same. And it did put me off for a while. I felt under so much pressure. And if I was fishing with somebody that I knew or had guided or whatever, you'd feel that extra pressure. And then, of course, you stuff a fish and that's the end of the world and you don't know what you're doing and stuff like that. And that's a really difficult one. Have you ever, it doesn't sound to me as though you've had those issues, but have you ever sort of felt that at all?
Probably not when I've just been out pleasure fishing. I've had actually guided sessions that have been like the pressure, and you're saying, oh, you stuff a fish and it's the end of the world, and there's all this pressure on. I mean, I've had guided days where I can certainly feel the pressure. I mean, I was out on a boat once, and it was a complete beginner, pretty much. He'd been out, he'd been on, and he booked me as a guided day. It was 4 hours. It was really cold. We're fishing him on sunk lines, and I could see he was getting takes off the tip of the rod because I wouldn't ever fish if I was guiding. So I've only got what I can see from him. Rod tips dipping away. Can see he's getting takes, and I'm saying, "Oh, was that a take? Was that a take?" Oh, and he was like, "No." And at the end of the day, he'd not had anything, but I knew we'd missed a few fish, and I said to him, "I was like, look, I'm really sorry. Sometimes this happens. I'm not very happy that you've not caught a fish, but we've done everything in our power." And give him, and I taught him loads while we were out there, and his response was, "That's all right. I just know I'll never book you again."
Oh, bloody!
And
hell.
I was like, oh yeah, that's one way of putting it. So that, I mean, I've had pressures like that, but never in a mountain boat. I know, I've been out in a boat with people and they'll make jokes where they'll comment and say, "Oh, I thought you were supposed to be good," or, "Where should we go now?" Well, I thought you'd know this, or I thought you'd know more by the back of your hand. But I just sort of laugh it off, to be fair.
Yeah. I think I'm self-analysing myself about it, and the guiding aspect I'd rise to because I love that part of it and the pressure of kind of backing yourself and finding the fish. Whereas on myself, the pressure on myself is colossal sometimes. When I was guiding, that is, I felt colossal at times. And now I don't guide. I don't even look at the fishing in quite the same way. So if I'm just fishing with friends, oh look, that got hung up in a tree, or that, and that happens. And as you well know, everyone gets hung up, don't they?
Yeah, everyone gets entangles. Everyone makes bad casts. Everyone fluffs. Fish and chances. It's the way it is. And if you didn't make that, it wouldn't draw you to keep doing it. I think you've got to make those mistakes and have those, bad casts to make you realise, I'm sure you still get it now, where you actually make a really good cast, probably, more on a river than where you get the drift just right, even if the fish doesn't take, but you're happy with how the cast's gone. And, you might perform like a reach cast around a tree or something, and it's gone in perfectly just where you want it, and you think, oh, that was mega. But if you didn't have cast where you'd put it in the tree, you'd probably just be like, well, it's another cast.
Yeah, I think that's the way to look at it. And do you think sometimes people think there is this tremendous gap between people like yourself and anglers or well-known anglers? Do you think it is a colossal gap, a big gap, or do you think it is just how it is and some just have that extra little 1% or 5% that makes a difference?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think one of the key things with people that guide and fish a lot and work at fisheries is time on the water. I remember when I first started working at stocks when I was 16. I can't remember who it was, but it was one of the, competition anglers there. He said, well, your fishing's going to improve. I've never seen anyone work at a fishery and their fishing has gone backwards. So I think that's a big thing, just time on the water. But I think it comes down to the person and what you want to get out of fishing. I think a lot of people like to just go out and, and you do see them, they genuinely are happy to go out there and be out there and not catch. And they're happy with that. But I think for the anglers that, these ones you say, the top 1%, they're the ones that go and they want to catch fish. And they read and they research and they try different things and they're never constantly satisfied. I'd say that was the difference. I'd say that a lot of the top comp anglers that you see, and I'd say, that top 1% is normally comp anglers because that's just how they're wired. They compete and they want to do as well as they can all the time. Pleasure anglers is the same, but I think when you fish that competition, you get that slight edge on your sort of own want to catch more. I think you're never satisfied with how you're catching them. You're always thinking, is there a way of catching these quicker? Is there a better way of doing this? And I think that's what makes the difference. I wouldn't say it's like a standout, there is something that these anglers have that do specific. I think it's just a bit of a mindset about it. But I don't think the gap's that massive. I've guided a lot of anglers who, when you're out there with them, you're watching them, and they could be, a really good angler catching, that old adage that 95% of the anglers catch 5% of the fish. No, 5% of the anglers catch 95% of the fish. They could be in that 5%. And all they need to do is just do a couple of little tweaks. But to do those couple of little tweaks, they'd have to just probably slightly change their own pleasure fishing and how they approach the day. And if they don't want to do that, then that's probably the difference. But I think it just comes down to mindset.
Yeah. And do you think also being aware of the conditions, being more acutely aware, and like you say, being at Draycote, so you know what's going on, you get the feel of the water, but you're able to make those changes slightly more quickly. So you're aware, right, okay, I think they're down in the water a little bit deeper, or they're coming up in the water. Do you think that's part of it as well? And making and ringing those changes just that little bit quicker can make that difference as well?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when I, used to teach the beginner days at Drake, one of the key things I always said is you can't fast track experience. And experience and time in the water is the things that make you realise, when to change and when to not. One of the key things a lot of people would ask when I was guiding was like, well, how do you know when to change? How do you know when to do this? And I think a lot of people, they get, I don't know the best way to put it, but they get like almost itchy feet, like they must be catching, they must be changing, when sometimes it's just a hard day. And I always say to people, if you're out on a busy water, just look around. If nobody around you's catching, it's probably just a hard day, and just to pick your method and stick to the method that you're happy with. And you'll fish it better than any method that you're not comfortable with, or you're not confident with. Same with the flies. Pick your flies that you're happy with and fish them as well as you can if it's going to be a hard day. And a lot of people, when you say that, they're like, oh yeah, I've never actually thought to like look around and see what other people do. Like if other people are catching, I always think that it's just I'm doing it wrong and they're doing it wrong, and I just need to keep changing until it's right. And some days that just isn't the way to do it.
And are you similar like that when you're fishing river as well? That do you fish that? I'm getting the sense slightly more for pleasure. So do you fish it in a slightly different way, or is it hard to take the guide out of the angler so that you're, like we were saying, aware of stuff and you're thinking about stuff the whole time?
I probably switch off a little bit more in the river. I mean, for instance, like I'll go through a run. Say if I was nymphing, I'll go through a run with, say like I might have a 3.5 mil tungsten bead on the point, and I'm fouling up a bit too much, and I know to myself that I probably should change, but sometimes I just don't. I just can't be bothered. I'll just fish it through a little bit. I'll just hold the indicator a bit higher and just fish it a bit higher in the water rather than changing. Whereas if I was out guiding with someone, I would change that, and I would. And I think on a res, I'd probably change it a little bit as well. But I've actually tried to, ever since watching the Howard Cosson documentary on the World Championships, I've actually tried to take a little bit, not more care with my river fishing, but actually be more aware of what I'm doing when I'm actually fishing, just to try and see, just on a personal level, on the results. If I do this, if I will catch more fish. So,
very interesting point you make about the Hal Croston thing, and I know I caught up with him at the BFFI and we talked about the video. And yeah, as somebody who's not interested in competition fishing, but to see the dedication that went into that and his leadership as well is quite extraordinary, wasn't it?
I loved it. I messaged Howard after I watched the first one and was like, this is amazing. Howard is a fantastic angler, and to get an insight into how he fishes and how he approaches it. And like you said, the dedication it takes to get to where he is, and also, what he did to do there, going to different places and getting himself out of his comfort zone. I think that's one thing, that I've tried to implement, like I say, the dedication, and just keep trying to change things when I'm fishing to try and get it right. But yeah, it was a really, really good documentary. I found it really interesting. I think even if you're not into, as you say, into comp fishing, it's just a good watch. It's just a nice thing to put on the TV. Actually made partner Charlotte's mum watched the second one with me. She was at my house, so put it on and she had to watch it.
I bet she loved every minute of that.
She did. She
Yeah.
actually did. She did say it was very interesting.
Good. Perhaps she, of course, wasn't being polite.
No. She's not always polite, so we'll say that.
So, as somebody who's got both feet firmly planted in the reservoir scene and the river scene, how do they look comparable from a age group perspective, from a growth, those sorts of things? Do you detect similarities? Do you detect differences between the two disciplines? Or is there anything that you think one slightly sort of has a younger demographic or an older demographic, or is seen as cooler, as not as cool? What are your observations between the two?
I'd say there's probably it's difficult because I think there's growth in both recently. I think that you can say there is growth in both disciplines. I'd say river fishing has possibly become cool. I'd say that a lot of people, you see these sort of fashion things that are tying like fly fishing into it, and it's all about fishing rivers. I know there's that clothing make that based in London that are done like a fly fishing. Is it Fairer? They've
Yeah.
done like a fly fishing, urban fly fishing thing, and they've got, and they're trying to make it cool. There was that Adidas did end fly fishing, and that was all about a lot of that was. So I think fly fishing is starting to get cool, but I would say the demographic on rivers is probably slightly older, just because I think of this, the historic clubs, and they're still, they're quite expensive. They've got long waiting lists, so I'd say because of that, they've probably got a slightly older aging demographic on rivers. But you've still got, I would say, across the board, it's still a middle aged, probably even older than that, early retiree sport. When I first started working at Draycote and when I worked at Stocks, I started Stocks when I was 17. When I went to Draycote, I was 21. And the question I got asked by everyone was I Ben's dad? Was I Ben's son? And was I Ivor's son? Because they couldn't believe that anyone would get into it who wasn't, the son of somebody in the industry. So I think it is an aging sort of population. There is, you're certainly starting to see more young people take it up. I think the England youth is sort of starting to grow again. I see they've started doing a Rivers team as well. I've come off Facebook, so I don't actually see that much, but when I do go on, I do see these things. And I think there is growth in that, but probably not quick enough, to be honest. I think we need more youngsters, but it's a very difficult thing. I started when I was 13, and I didn't tell anyone when I was a kid that I fly fished until I got to like 17, 18, 16, and I was quite comfortable saying it because at the end of the day, it's not cool. You can't go into a school and talk to your mates about the fish you've caught because they don't care, and women don't care. I can tell you now, when I was 17, trying to get a girlfriend, there was no way I was telling them that I enjoyed going fly fishing at the weekend, because it just wasn't gonna. And that's the difficult bit. You've got to try and somehow break that mold and get it cool again so that it can be spoke about. And that's probably a thing of trying to get it back into schools. Doing fishing clubs so that people who love it have got something to talk about with the friends. I think that's the only way you're going to probably improve the demographic drastically.
That's a great answer. And you segue beautifully because I wanted to look at the Tom Bird origin story and find out a little bit about where fishing started for you. So where did it sounds like very, very young, you had a fly rod thrust into your hand or a fishing rod thrust into your hand. Where did that all start for you?
So I didn't start, well, I started quite late in my eyes. I'd love to have started when I was, 2. I started when I was 13. So I grew up near Ramsbottom in Lancashire. The River Irwell is very close to my house, well, a field away. And my best friend growing up owned the farm across. Him and his dad were fly fishermen. His dad used to go up to the River Eckig, sea trout fishing every year. And they used to go down fishing. And that was when he went fishing, it was the only time when I was a kid that we weren't messing around on the farm or playing out together. And I think one of the women at the yard noticed, bought me a Argos fly fishing rod. I think my dad still got it actually. And I mithered him to take him. It was one of those. I always wanted to give it a go, but nobody fished in my family. No one's ever fished in my family. I've taken my dad a couple of times. He's horrendous. He was a professional drummer for 16 years. And I've never seen anyone with so bad reactions when you tell them to strike on a river. It was absolutely woeful. So I mothered him. He took me fishing, finally. And then after a while, that's all I wanted to do. And he said, well, if we're going to go fly fishing, if we're going to go fishing all the time, I'm going to teach you how to cast. So he taught me to cast. And it was one of those things, looking back at it, I could never, this sounds really big-headed, but I could never remember not being able to cast a fly rod. To actually be, I just remember it was one of those things. I picked it up really quickly. And then after that, that was it. I was just obsessed. Went on the river as much as I could. Bought my kit. My dad still is exceedingly supportive. He used to take me down to my local tackle shop to go and look at fly fishing kit. And he, if I said I wanted a new rod, he'd go down and we'd talk about it. And normally he'd buy it me, but and I just absolutely loved it. And then that's how I sort of got into working for it as well. Just my absolute love for it. Just couldn't face not doing it as a job, I think.
So there wasn't a time where you suddenly thought, this is for me. It was pretty much straight away.
It was probably at the time I thought this is for me work-wise. So I knew that I was getting pretty into the realms of absolute obsession when I was 16. So I finished, 15, finished school, starting to do my GCSEs, everyone's revising. I was talking to everyone before the exam, how much revision have you done? And they're all, giving it hours, and I'd flick through. I was quite good at exams, so I didn't fail it. I passed everything, so just chucking that out there. I'd done about 10 minutes in between fishing and that sort of GCSEs, and then it came to A-levels, and it was one of those, right, you've got to apply to university, you've got to do UCAS, you must do this, and I didn't want to do it. I was going to go to Leeds University and do business studies because my friends were going, and I was quite good at business at A-level. And when I was applying for the UCAS thing, I thought, you know what, let's see if there's any fishing courses. Pressed F. There was a fisheries degree down at Sparsholt. I thought, that sounds quite good. Told my mum and dad. They were like, oh, well, we're not sure. You should maybe move all the way to Hampshire if you're not sure. So I Googled, found a local college course at Myerscoats in Preston to me, and I could drive at the time. Said, right, we'll go and do that. Went and did that. And then, after that, sort of was like, I think this is what I want to do for a job. And then at the time, I sort of said to Ben at Put Stocks, can I come and do some, free work placement during the Easter holidays to see if this is what I want to do? He said, yeah. And at the time, I then offered me a job, and I couldn't decide whether I wanted to carry on doing the job or go and get the degree. And I thought, I'll go and get the degree because, it's easier when you're young and in education than to go back to. And that's what I did. And then, I've been in fisheries probably, since the age of 16.
And were your parents supportive of that?
Yeah, they were. My dad, like I say, he was a professional musician for years. He owned music shops. He then became a bookkeeper down in London. But music was his passion. So he'd already done what he wanted to do, and then kind of got into a job. I think that not that he didn't want to do, but it was certainly one of those where it was paying the bills, not necessarily his absolute love. And when I said, this is what I want to do, he was really supportive. My mum was the same. I remember my dad got a little bit drunk at a family wedding we went to, and he was vociferously telling everyone at the table that how happy he was that I was going into something that I loved for work, and I was never going to do something. I was always going to love what I did for work. So yeah, he was definitely supportive, and he is still very supportive.
I think that's a really lovely story. Somebody contacted me today. That's one of the reasons I asked. And they said, I really want to work in fishing. What are your recommendations? And mine was, don't. I said, it's a really, really he's a little bit older as well. And I said, not sure, he's got employment and everything else as well. But I said, I don't really know how easy that would be to get into and what to do, other than, I guess, the route that you've taken as well is a fabulous way. And it's almost in some respects old school, isn't it? That, okay, you've got a qualification, but you've gone along, offered to work somewhere for free and just worked your way through all the way, haven't you?
Yeah, yeah, basically. I mean, I would say I've got quite an old school kind of way of looking at things. I think you should, go and, if you're interested, go and sort of do a bit and give it a go for, and I wasn't, when I was a kid, I'd worked since the age of like 13 in greengrocers and pubs. So I wasn't afraid of going and getting my hands dirty and giving it a go. And I thought that was the best way to learn, off somebody that wants to do it. But you're certainly never going to make a fortune in fly fishing. And you do it because you love it. I can hand on heart say I have never, ever got up for work and dreaded going to work. If you ask Charlotte, my partner, the alarm goes off and I straight out of bed. I've never, I've had days where they've not been the most entertaining. I can remember back where it was the beast from the east when we had to go into work. That wasn't very fun. -3 and sleet with a northerly wind and having to bail the boats at Draycote just as it was getting light. That was also not a particularly. But at the end of the day, you stop, you finish, and it's quite rewarding work. And I just absolutely love it. It's your hobby, and you do. It becomes a way of life. You end up going in on your days off. You when I was on Facebook, social media, you've got people messaging you how it's fishing, you're talking all the time about it. But I wouldn't change it for the world. I'd absolutely love working in fisheries.
Yeah, absolutely. What I wanted to ask you next as well was a bit about competition fishing as well, because you competition fish, you fish for England. How did that tie in with everything? Was that just another challenge that came along the way, or was that something that you'd harboured for quite some time? When did that come into your fishing timeline?
That was working when I did my work placement with Ben when I was 16. I said, basically that period then was the change where I got into res fishing, or and just at that time, river fishing, it was just starting to, or it was more mainstream to start using check nymphing, and methods were developing on the rivers. And at the time, I just used to fish dries. When I was 15, 16, I never fished nymphs. I just used to go out with a 5-weight, fish dries, an Adams or something like that. And then just as I started working at Stocks, got really into the res fishing, and that's what I got really into. And I said to Ben, I want to get better at it. I want to do more of it. And he said, well, we do a competition club called the Bowlanders. Enter that, and you could draw, a top angler. You could draw someone that you would pay for a guided day out with, and just fishing next to them in a boat. You're going to learn a lot. So that's what I did, and my sort of learning curve in fly fishing just took off, and I was so into trying to learn as much as I could, and get as much information as humanly possible. I didn't stop river fishing, but it certainly went on the back burner, and I just fell in love with the comps. It's never been a thing of oh, I want to win, or that desire. It's good when it happens, but it was that camaraderie of the team going away together, staying away, the practice, and also just being in a boat with new people. And then when it all comes together, there is the nice feeling of you normally do quite well.
Do you still do it?
I stopped doing it when I was at Draycote. Just it never fell in. I remember my first year at Draycote. I think it was my first or my second year. I'd qualified. I'd qualified for England. So I was fishing an international. I'd got selected for the Five Nations team when they used to select them, and I'd qualified. And I'd done. I was in the national final that year, and I was doing the qualifiers for the next year. So I think I'd got 6 days off for both internationals. I'd taken 2 days off for the qualifier. I'd taken 4 days off. I basically allotted my whole entire holiday on fishing competitions, and they fell into our busiest times. May, September, June, and I said, look, if you want to progress on them, we want you to do more for us in the company. You're going to have to choose whether you want to fish competitions or whether you want to progress on and go a bit further with your career. And I chose to, drop the competition fishing. And to be fair, I missed elements of it, but I didn't miss some of it. I certainly became a bit more of a fair weather fisherman. Picked my days. I remember I did go and fish comp, and I was out on Rutland, and it was like 18 miles an hour wind and raining, and I was like, why? This is why I don't fish them anymore, because I would not be out here if I didn't have to be. But this year I'm doing some England qualifiers again and fishing a few more matches, so we'll see how we go.
Have you done it for rivers as well?
No, only the Five Nations. That was a rivers one. Weirdly, I don't get the chance to go on a lot of the venues that they use for the matches. So I fish the D, but not a lot. And I would be more keen to do river competitions if they peg them. And then it's down a little bit to the luck of the draw, but also your ability to fish the water that's in front of you. In the Five Nations, it was a pegged event, and that's one of the reasons I was quite happy to do it, because I don't like the idea of of losing it or not doing as well because somebody knows the river better. I like the idea of just being put against somebody and pitting your angling ability against you, the fish, and them on a standardised bit of water, really. So I may well look at doing the rivers going forward. Like I say, I enjoyed that Howard Crossing thing. I quite fancy a go at the World, so you never know.
I can't remember if we talked on mic or off mic when I did the podcast with Howard Croston. And you brought up something very interesting there, that you said one of the competitions was the team was selected and the other one it qualified. Where do you think, in your opinion, is the best way to select a winning team? Is it by qualification or is it selection?
I think it's got to be from qualification. I think the issue is that there is some anglers in the UK who don't fish the qualifiers anymore, for various reasons. Whether that's cost, or they don't like the way they ran, or whatever. There's a number of very good competition anglers in the UK on both rivers and lakes that don't fish the qualifiers anymore. You would probably get a better team possibly if you selected all of those anglers than the anglers that are fishing the qualifiers. But then by the same score, you can't just pick them because historically they've been very good. You've got to select from the people that want to do it and prepared to commit. But yeah, you certainly, I think qualifying gives you the best team, and it's the fairest way of doing it as well. At the end of the day, I don't think I was happy to be selected, but and I'm not saying it wasn't. It was unfair. At the time, it was selected on anglers that the manager thought would progress on, showed real potential to possibly, in both venues, and it was a chance to put them together, and it was quite a young team with some experience. We had Tony Baldwin, Simon Kidd, people like that who'd been to Europeans before. They were in the team as well, but it was a chance to just get us all together and give us a taste, and push on from there. And I know, Harry Fox was in that Five Nations team, and he's gone on to fishing the Europeans and the EPP. So I would say it worked.
Great. It's just really interesting to hear that view, because I think the mentoring thing as well could work fabulously well. And it could be like the Alex Ferguson, you never win anything with kids. But look what they did. Yet there's arguments both ways, isn't there? And as somebody who's only looked from the outside, it's not my place to say. But it's interesting to get a view from somebody who's experienced both sides of it. So I think that's a really interesting points that you make there. But you've mentioned Draycote a number of times, and that's going to be opening again. And I wondered, obviously, was that a difficult time for you when the closure came?
Yeah, it was. Well, obviously lost my job. I'd always had aspirations of taking on the company or taking on the lease, and running it, and running a reservoir. I'd committed a lot of my life and my time to Draycote and the company, and was personally very invested, not in a monetary sense, just time. It was my absolute passion. I live and breathe it. So when it all just crumbled, it was not good. I mean, after that, I couldn't even think about going fishing for months. I think I went on the river once, but yeah, I didn't. When did it? I think I got found out as being made redundant in Feb. I think it was February, and then I don't think I went fishing again until May. And I just wasn't even interested in going.
So did that take a lot to get you back to doing that? And once you did it, did that help? Did you feel some form of closure as a result of that?
It didn't take much. It just the weather started improving. I love this time of year now. I am long nights, sun's out, and it was literally I was reading reports and seeing reports that the buzzers are starting to fish. Rutland was starting to fish really well, and I just thought, you know what, I fancy going again. And that's all it was. It wasn't like I didn't need dragging it. It was just I kind of got out on a little bit of a lull, and the weather started improving, and the fishing started getting good. And I thought, oh, do you know what, I'm going.
And sometimes those little breaks in the force, as I call it, can help and make you come back stronger too, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a massive advocate of having a close season. I think not necessarily for everyone, but I think it's good to have a break. Not to. I know now a lot of the reservoirs are open longer and they're only shut for sort of like a month. But I like to, and people always used to say to me, "Oh, do you fish much in the winter?" And I'll go and fish grayling days, but I like to have a break away from it and just reset, refresh. Especially when it's your job, you're talking about it day in, day out. I think it's good to go away, refresh, and then come the first of Feb, you've got a month till you're open again. You're keen to get going. You only need a couple of months off it to recharge the batteries and get you going again.
Nice. Well, let's move on a little bit, because your life is about to take an exciting new turn. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah. So I'm off. I'm moving down to Hampshire. I've got a sort of job of a lifetime opportunity, working on the Leckford estate, as the new head riverkeeper after Rob, who's been the riverkeeper for 30 years, is retiring. So he's going to carry on for a couple of years. He's moving across to, I think, senior keeper, and he's going to help me progress into, that full role. And that's that. So, I mean, it is a job for life. It was when I first got into, fly fishing and started reading because obviously no one was in my family. So, and like I say, I wanted to flatten that learning curve off. So I read a lot of books when I was younger. 15, 16 on fly fishing. And as soon as I heard about river keepers and the chalk streams, I did want to be a river keeper. So when I was at university, I did a lot of placements through university, on rivers. I worked on the Winchester College stretch of the Itchen. I worked at Broadlands with John Hall on the test. I did my dissertation on weed cutting. So and after I left uni, I actually went and met with Ron Holloway, the famous river keeper from the Itchen in his local pub, which was very strange. I say strange. We sat underneath a picture of him in the pub, and it was called Ron's Corner. And I found it very strange that we sat in the pub underneath a picture of a man and basically just asked his advice on how to get to river keeping. And his advice was don't get out of the industry. You've got to stay in no matter what you're doing. Just try and stay in the industry. But at the time, there was just no river keeping jobs. They're like dead man shoes, and there wasn't any available. So I took the job at Draycote and put it on the back burner. But when the opportunity come up, leapt at the chance. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to go and do it as well.
Awesome. I've sat in that pub with Ron as well. It is quite strange, isn't it? It's like two Rons are watching you, isn't it?
Yeah.
So has it been difficult to uproot everything, the move from where you are now down to Hampshire to be on the river test? Has that been a complex manoeuvre?
Yeah, I'm currently looking at my living room full of boxes. So we're actually moving on Good Friday. So that adds a bit of another dilemma into it. But it's been a little bit complicated. Obviously, it's not a massive move. I live in the Midlands, about 10 minutes away from Draycote. It's an hour and a half, really, trip down the A34, M40, A34. So it's not a huge move, but logistically, it's been a bit interesting, just trying to get all the movers and get everything to fall in line. But the Letford Estate have been really good. There's a house with the job, so they've been really good in getting that set up. And so, yeah, it's not been. I wouldn't say it's been seamless so far, but it's not been too bad.
Brilliant. How very exciting. And I'm sure there's many people listening would love to know. We don't want everything, but I'm sure there's not a written exam for the interview. But how is the interview process? Is it a number of people you're seeing? How was that, and how did you find that?
It was just two people, so two managers, the estate manager, and then the chap who looks after the leisure side of it. So there's they do golf at Letford as well. And because it's owned by John Lewis and Waitrose, there was some set questions that are a sort of standardised interview. Then there was some job specific questions about the job, and then after that, I went and did sort of a site visit with the current head keeper Rob. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't. To be fair, it wasn't too dissimilar to a sort of normal interview, if you know what I mean, because of the way it's set up. It was there was set questions, and it was outlined kind of the way a normal interview would be. It wasn't, and I didn't have to do. There was no. Can you demonstrate your ability to do this or do this? It was just the bit that was probably specific to the role was the job specific questions.
Nice. And how did that feel when you heard that you got the job?
Yeah, it was good. It was really good. It was quite funny. So I was out. So I've been working with Uphaven and Ben, and we were out on Farmore. And it had been a week since I'd done the interview, and I thought, I must be getting close to hearing. I was like, I wonder if I'm going to get a phone call while I'm out in a boat with my current boss. It's going to be a bit awkward. And then just so happened, I looked at my phone just as we were packing up, and I got a text saying, can you, is it convenient for us to speak? And I said, it's not at the minute, but I'm available in about half an hour. and rang me and said, "Yeah, we'd like to offer you the job." And it was fantastic. Very, it was one of those. It was amazing to get offered the job and like the opportunity, and then fantastic, and then very suddenly after that, it was like the realization of, oh, I'm going to have to move. Oh, my friends are here. Oh God, this is quite a lot. So it was mixed emotions, but yeah, I'm very excited. I'm very very excited to get going. To be fair.
Many, many congratulations, and I'm sure you'll bring your love, your passion, your skill to the fishing there. Often when I stay up and fish that neck of the woods, I can't remember what the name of the pub is now, but I find a cheap room every now and again, and it's Rob's local. So I quite often bump into him in the pub in the evening,
Right.
but I can't remember what the name of the pub is now. It'll come to me at some stage.
Well, you've got the Pete Spade.
That's it. That's
Yeah,
it.
the Pete Spade.
Yeah, yeah. He'd often be in there. They do a cheap room every now and again. So when they come up and I'm in that neck of the woods, that I go and stay there. So yeah, I used to bump into him a little bit there. But I guess does that mean that that's going to get in the way of fishing plans for this year? You're sort of going to get yourself grounded in your new neck of the woods, the job, everything else. So you're going to be focused mainly on that.
Yeah, I've got a couple of matches already booked in that I'll do. I've spoken to them and they'll honour any leave I've already got booked. So I'm doing a Lockstyle qualifier down at Wimbledon in Somerset. So that's already booked in. So I'll do that, and then I've got a couple of other matches. But to be honest, I will, I'll commit quite a bit of time to making sure that it's a quite a big role. There's a lot to it. And I want to make sure that while I've got Rob there to help me, I can get as much knowledge extracted out of him as I can. So if it means that the fishing takes a little bit of a backward step this year, then I'm fine with that. Like I say, it's a job of a lifetime, and I don't not enjoy. I've never not enjoyed going to work. So if I've got to work a load of weekends and not fish as much, it won't bother me. Walking around the river test and looking at large brown trout and insects isn't going to worry me too much.
Yeah, like I say, many congratulations. Really well done. And I'm sure it's going to be a huge success for you. So that's wonderful to hear. Do you have somewhere, let's imagine you're wandering those beautiful banks of the Test and the fish are rising, there's a few flies hatching, but you suddenly find yourself thinking about that dream destination. Is there somewhere that you would love to visit, take a fly rod and perhaps catch a few fish?
I've always wanted to go to New Zealand. I would love to do that. I have been to Slovenia. I'd really like to go back there. I went with Sean Leonard and the Wild Trout Trust on like a conference type thing that a Belgian bloke had set up. It was all about him wanting to grow a European network of young people. So me and another chap from university went, and we went and had a load of lectures there with all these different, students that were studying fisheries from all over. There was people from Germany, Iceland, Italians. There was loads of different people. But we didn't actually we got to fish there, but we were just wherever we were having the conference. So I'd like to go back and do that a bit more. But probably the ideal place would be probably New Zealand, I think, just to go and give it a go. I've always wanted to go that far over there.
Good choice. Good choice. And isn't that wonderful that those events were taking place for connecting people to help them, I guess, in their future roles in fishing?
Yeah, it was amazing. I was so grateful of the opportunity. It'd been basically there was another chap at my university got offered it because he was doing his dissertation quite closely with the Wild Trout Trust. They'd been this chap had been in contact with the Wild Trout Trust, said, look, we want 2 delegates from the UK, young students. Can you think of anyone? They put him in touch with this chap called Matt, who was doing his dissertation with the Wild Trout Trust, and then I got asked to go with him, and it was amazing. It was really good. met loads of really interesting people, and met some Americans, and the way that some of the the lectures we went to was amazing. We went to one, and it was a chap who worked for Trout Unlimited, and he was talking about there was a section of river that he wanted to protect and save that was going through cattle ranches, and how he had to, his words were, reframe the issue to make the cattle ranchers see what the detriment to the river was, and it was that if they put this riparian zone in, that the cattle would then have better grazing because they wouldn't damage the riverbanks, and it wouldn't cause this erosion. And that was just it's something really simple, but it was just the way that he framed it was really good and interesting. And we did a lot of work with genetics as well, because over there a lot of it was about the marble trout over in Slovenia, and the way that they had saved it from hybridization with browns, and it was all about the genetics, and it was some of it was fascinating.
That sounds really, really cool. Really cool. Let's spin a little bit. You're going to New Zealand. You're on that trip. What is the Hall of Fame rod that you're going to take with you? I know you know your way around a fishing rod or two.
Hall of Fame rod. I really, really, really like the new Sage R8. I'd probably take one of those. Although I have to say, my Reddington Redfly 2 that I bought from Ted Carter's as my first proper fishing rod that I bought on my own, I might have to take that just for nostalgic. Yeah, I might take that. I think I've still got it. It's caught a obscene amount of fish because I used to use it every day. When I say it's not that I catch loads every time I go out, but when you fish on the river every day after school for 5 years using that rod, you're going to probably catch a few fish on it. So I probably would take that. But if it was going to be a new rod, it would probably be the new R8.
It's funny you mentioned the Reddington Red Fly, because my daughter's first rod was the Red Start, which is probably the same rod, and they designed it so with a nice line and stuff like that. And Reddington have always done some really interesting rods, haven't they? And they're there in the background, but they've never really been in the foreground over here, have they?
No, I'm not sure why. I mean, it's owned by the parent company's the same one that owns Sage and Rio. So, there's a lot of R&D that goes into it, and some really good, rod designers. I just think it's just one of those brands. It just never really sort of hit off in the UK. I think, Sage was already well established, and it's got a big following in America. And I think at the time they were probably trying to compete with Hardy and Grays, and Hardy and Grays had obviously got a massive following here. A bit of a cult. I remember my friend's dad. He was like, oh, just when I was like, oh, I need a new rod. He was just like, just buy a Grays. They'll never let you down. And I think that was it. It was probably just when they came into the UK. It's probably a little bit of the wrong time for them, if you know what I mean. I think it was just probably too difficult a market to try and break into.
Yeah, I wonder if their price point is in that really competitive part of the market as well, isn't it?
Yeah, especially now, I think, you've got your Visions, your Reddington, your Greys, your top end Witchwood are in there. You have got your sort of lower end Sages, like your Foundations, that just touch into that. It is really competitive, and it's one of those. How many rod makes do you need? There's so many. It does make it difficult for people to make that selection.
Yeah, it's a lovely problem to have, right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So let's move on to the dreaded question for the Fly Culture road trip mix. Now, somebody was asking me if it's a real thing, and it is. So it's on Spotify. You can find it. I haven't updated it for absolutely ages, so please accept my apologies for that. But I'm going to do that at some stage. What would be your song choice? You're going off to, well, in your new role, perhaps you've got the short drive to the I know if you're near the Pete Spade, it's not a long drive at all. So it's a 5-minute drive. But what's the song that's going to go on in the car?
I am going to go with Passenger, Life's for the Living. Absolute
Great
banger.
choice. I love Passenger. Love Passenger.
I've seen him live. Well, every time he tours, I go. So he's
Brilliant.
I love him.
Yeah, fantastic choice. Well, that's definitely going on. So I don't even know if I may even have one of his songs on there, actually. I can't remember what I think he was having a go at X Factor or something in one of the songs. Is there?
Things I Hate.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it. That's why I really particularly liked that as well. So, yep, I know well. So, right, well, that's going on. So that's very, very good news. Now, we're going to ask for your contact details, but it was interesting that you said to me that you're off Facebook. Is that just a conscious decision, or you just said, sorry, I've had enough of it?
I came off. So when the announcement went on about Draycote closing, I took the decision that I was coming off basically that day. I didn't want to be involved with all the negativity, and I knew there was going to be comments, from people that maybe paid season ticket money and were angry, and people that were, pushing ideas that weren't correct. And I knew that if I was on there, I wouldn't be able to help myself from saying something or commenting, and it would probably annoy me, and I'd probably spend my life reading it. And I thought, you know what, just come off it. And I've not been back on since. I probably will go back on, but yeah, I've made the sort of decision to just take a step away. I was probably spending a bit too much time on it as well, reading and looking, and social media is a fantastic place, and it certainly changed the way that UK fly fishing has changed. But I think it can also be a pretty negative place where people get sort of hung out to dry and their opinions, and people, it can make a fishery and it can also break a fishery at exactly the same time. And I like being away from it. I think certainly for a little bit.
Have you missed it?
I miss being in touch with certain things. I miss sort of the updates and seeing flies and catch reports and having my finger probably on the pulse, because it definitely, Facebook groups and Facebook is definitely the way that fly fishermen now share their information and their days reports, and you learn more on Facebook on catch returns than you will probably on fisheries. So I miss that element of it. But like I say, the negativity and the damage that some people can do to fisheries, and this can sound really bad, but the amount of experts that are on there that are giving their opinion on things that you know isn't right. I don't miss that at all.
Yeah, good. Right, well, okay, let's move on. How can people connect with you should they want to? Are you doing Instagram and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. TomBird45, I think is my handle. I think, but Tom Bird. I've got a picture of a fish. And then if they want to, they can. I have got a Facebook page for flies, which Charlotte looks after for me. I make her deal with all the notifications and the messages. And she puts all the pictures up for me as well. I just send them to her. But if there is a message, I will go on and reply. So TB Flies, that's on Facebook. So if people want to get in touch with me on there, they can do, or they can drop me an email. My email's on the Facebook page as well.
Brilliant. Well, everyone, I hope you'll give Tom a follow and wish him good luck in his new job too, because it sounds an exciting new chapter, and he's a good man too. So please do that if you get the opportunity to do it. Tom, as always, it's been lovely to catch up with you. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me and being a guest on the Fly Culture podcast today.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. I do listen to him. At the minute, I'm driving about an hour and 20 minutes up to work in the morning. So podcast, I'm well into podcasts. So I do listen to podcasts the entire drive up and back. So it's a pleasure to be on.
Fantastic. Well, you'll get to hear yourself in the next week or so as well. So thank you so much for being a guest. It's been great to catch up.
Cheers, Pete.
Well, everyone, this has been another episode of the Fly Culture Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. There'll never be any charge for these. It's just nice to talk to good people in fly fishing like Tom, hear their story and get to know the person behind the Instagram account as well. So thank you so much for listening to this episode. As ever, there'll be plenty more coming very, very soon. Thanks so much for listening.
The Fly Culture Podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly published magazine owned and run by fly anglers. When it comes to fly fishing, we've got you covered.